Hello, welcome to Agile World. Hello, Sabrina. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Other than the fact I've realized, actually I spoke to you about this earlier, when you put on a top or an item of clothing and you put it on, you kind of think, it's not for me, but you still wear it. Now I can see it on camera. It ain't for me, and I will be binning this item of clothing.
Happened to me the last time I put on a tank top. It just didn't look right on me for some reason. I just don't know why.
I look great in those. I look great in those.
Hello, welcome, Chris. How are you doing?
Not too bad, guys. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on Agile World.
Oh, you're most welcome. Do you want to kind of introduce us, or does fangirl Sabrina get to do it?
Oh, okay, I am going to do it. So I am an absolute fangirl of Chris. I am. I've been literally waiting months. There's multiple times we tried to get you on, but our paths have crossed because of the things that we've been doing. So, Chris, you are, as far as I'm concerned, the retrospective king, and you make retrospectives absolutely amazing, so fun. So many Agile coaches and so many Scrum Masters need to kind of follow you. I am an absolute fangirl. So that's my little introduction to you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Chris Stone, the Virtual Agile Coach is my moniker. And I guess that comes from my firm belief that you can enable frictionless innovation regardless of location. We can do Agile virtually. I think the last year has very much proven that. And it stemmed from the fact that a realization last year in particular was that, hey, I've never really had that golden aim that everyone seems to talk about, that co-located team, because I always had an element of distributed team. So I had a lot of learnings to share. So that's who I am. That's what I'm about, helping people do Agile well in a virtual location.
Which is needed right now. So one thing we are interested in is, can you tell us about your Agile journey? How did you get into it? Where did it first start?
Yeah, so my Agile journey, I would say it began during my university studies. So I was doing a master's in project management. And it then evolved. I joined a large consultancy, Computer Science Corporation, on their graduate project management scheme. And I began working primarily a waterfall background. And then I got my first exposure to Agile in the real world. And I was working on this program for Network Rail at the time, a large transport and logistics company in the UK. And it involved 3 work streams, one of which was Agile. And I remember I was in this very waterfall environment. I had management asking me for the Gantt charts, and it was all budget, schedule, scope, etc. And I had this lead developer of one of these work streams working in an Agile way. And when I said to him, hey, Shebin, what dates are we working to here? And he said, well, we're working in Agile, we're doing it in sprints. And I was like, damn, there's a bit of a disconnect here. And to be honest, it just made sense when I worked with this third party team, and they were working in Agile, and they were saying, hey, what we do is we work in sprints and we deliver frequently and we learn from what we're doing and we pivot accordingly. It all just made sense. So it really clicked with me. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to work in an Agile way? So I became a bit of an evangelist. I was sold back then, and I increasingly began working in Scrum Master type roles. From there, it evolved into helping others in Accenture, another consultancy I work for, helping other work streams and projects get kicked off in an Agile way, leveraging some of my experience. And then from there, it led into helping companies transform their ways of working.
So I'm going to pick you up on a term, Agile evangelist. Is that like someone who stands on a street corner with a sign saying Agile is coming?
I guess it comes from evangelism. It's a bit of a strong word, isn't it? It comes from that religious terminology. To me, I would say evangelism is too strong nowadays. I align myself to Agile agnosticism. So I don't believe in any particular framework is the answer, any approach is the answer. If anything, Agile to me is just a continuous experiment in learning what works for a company, a situation, the people they're in. Evangelism is just a term for describing vociferously, I guess, being an advocate for, demonstrating the value in doing Agile. And that's where it came from. I'm not necessarily standing on street corners, or I'm not virtually standing on a street corner shouting about Agile these days. To be honest, I don't really focus on Agile as a thing. I focus on doing work well remotely.
And I was just about to ask you for some of your dance moves as well, because I know you are a pretty good mover from when I've seen you work.
I won't be dancing today. Don't worry. No one has to do no one has to deal with that. But maybe Saturday, I'm going to the pub for the first time in many a moon with some friends. So who knows? I may bust some shapes then.
So you started off, you started working with this client, you started to get interested. What path did you take to start gaining that knowledge? Did you do any certifications? Did you go to any conferences? How did you take that path?
Research. I was in a common situation for, I believe, consultants to be in, where you are sold into a role without the experience in it and you're expected to perform. So I had to go onto a client site and say, hey, I'm a Scrum Master and this is how we do Agile. And I had to learn that on the fly. A little bit of support from other people within the company I was working for. At this point in time, there wasn't really Agile communities of practice that existed much, but there was a few other people who had some exposure to it. Resources out on the internet like Mike Cohn's Mountain Goat Software blog. That was a great starting point for me. I didn't take my first certification till 2015. So by that point, I'd already been working as a Scrum Master for years. And my first certification was Certified Scrum Master. And for that, to me, it was more of a checkbox exercise to say, hey, I've got that qualification for future employment opportunities, rather than it was for my own learning and development, because I was already living and breathing that Scrum Master role. So yeah, that's kind of how my journey has gone. And nowadays, I make so much time for my personal learning and development, and that tends to come through blogs, YouTube videos, podcasts, and attending conferences to hear from other professionals in the Agile sphere who might challenge my perceptions, who might introduce me to new ways of working that I can then trial for myself, see if they work, and help others use.
So how did you make that leap from Scrum Master to coach? Because I think a lot of people are still, they may change their job title to become an Agile coach, but it's not just a different kind of Scrum Master. So how did you make that change? I mean, and if you say it's all research, then I'll accept that, but I think there's got to be something a bit more.
So for me, it was just the scale at which I was operating. Where I began, it was primarily single team work. And then it began helping multiple teams. And then it began, well, how can agility be used across the organization outside of the team? So I guess it naturally evolved with the experience I was being given, the opportunities I had at the time to increasingly work at a different scale, that lended itself to me transitioning into more of an Agile coaching role. And I do completely agree with you that there is a tendency out there that I've seen for someone to change their title to an Agile coach, perhaps prematurely, based on maybe a qualification, based on perhaps what they've seen in the industry and others doing, and they feel they have to do so to compete, perhaps because of certain companies. Spotify, for example, rebranded Scrum Masters to Agile coaches, so everyone became an Agile coach regardless of the scale they were operating as. I think there's lots of things that have contributed towards that, but my journey was very much, it was just a natural evolution of the scale I was operating at, the type of work I was doing, that led me to transition into more of a coaching role.
So, sorry, I'm going to ask quite a lot of questions about Agile coaching. It's one of my favorite topics because I never call myself one.
Okay.
Because we had the conversation before this, and I said I'm an Agile coach. I am in terms of working practice, but in terms of self-description, I consider myself to be a consultant.
Okay.
And so my coaching is actually around supporting business people or senior technologists in understanding how to navigate Agile in their current organizations. How do they adopt it in a way that actually doesn't disrupt the flow of work and actually doesn't create risk? So, I mean, how maybe I'll just give you the answer, I don't know, but how do you evidence your coaching with the people you work with?
Interesting question. So for me, I guess I'm going to come back to my Agile agnosticism, and similar to you, and I think it probably helps that I've come from that consulting background. I will go into any new situation. My first intent is just to listen. How are things currently working? What are they currently doing? What's the situation, the context, the people involved? I don't want to change anything at all right at the beginning. I just want to learn how things are currently working. And then, depending on the context, this is where I might suggest, well, there's this you could try, there's this you could try. Let's pilot with this, let's experiment with that. And to me, it's that from there, it becomes this continuous experiment in learning. And that could be borrowing tenets from SAFe, tenets from Scrum. It could be going, this team just works in Scrum, this team prefers Kanban. It's just a journey of discovery to help that client, that company, that situation find what works for them. And this is why I often say, innovate, don't replicate. Don't just copy and paste the latest Spotify model, because they never intended it for it to be copied anyway. But don't just copy that. So the context is absolutely key. And I guess from a coaching perspective, I very much subscribe to Lisa Adkins' coaching competency matrix model. That to me, I feel describes an agile coach quite well. There's lots of elements to it, and you may not be perfect at all of them. There's transformation mastery, there's business mastery, there's mentoring, coaching, and to be honest, it's a bit of a spectrum. You might focus your attention in certain areas to develop them over time, and you might focus entirely on one area and just be absolutely fantastic at that. But yeah, coaching is a broad thing, and you could spend a lifetime learning, doing, progressing at it, getting better, getting worse in certain areas as a consequence. It's just an evolution.
So how did you become the king of retrospectives?
Not my language, by that man. Sabrina's language.
Well, no, actually, it's the way I describe you as well, because
okay.
I just think it's not that you own it, it's just that you wear it.
Yeah, I think
very well as well.
I think where it comes from is a retrospective for me is my favorite of all of the agile ways of working. If there was one thing I could encourage all teams to do and commit to, it'd be a retrospective, because it's just that wonderful opportunity as a team just to sit back and reflect on what's gone well and what hasn't gone well. And where I began, I guess, investing more time in it, in particular in the last year, was I thought, I'm bored of doing the same retrospectives. And people disengage and switch off when it's the same retrospectives. It's what made us sad, what made us glad. It just doesn't provoke different thinking. It doesn't keep people engaged. It's very easy to switch off. So it just started with me playing around and creating a new one, and then another new one. And then I started getting feedback from others. Oh, they like that. They like this. And then it just kind of became I'm going to release a new one every week. And then this year I'm releasing 52, one for each week of the year. And then it was, well, people are liking this enough. They're liking the style of doing it, that I should do some workshops about it to share my knowledge and expertise. And I guess that has resulted in me getting a bit of a following for retrospectives, to the point that people seek it out. I had just a message just today from someone saying, love your retrospectives, really appreciate all the work you do. When's your Taco Tuesday one coming out? Because Mike Cohen challenged me to do a Taco Tuesday retrospective. It's like, great, people are looking forward to seeing the next ones now. So that, I guess, explains my journey. Quite simply, I was bored of seeing the ones that are out there. I felt we could do better there. I'm a firm believer that that work can be fun if you are a little bit creative. Immerse people into a theme, and they'll remain engaged. And that's how it happens.
The thing is that I think the reason why I fell in love with what you're doing is, I remember back in the day when I was very first beginning as a Scrum Master, and the retrospectives was the one thing I actually feared, because a lot of the teams, the whole point of me being hired was because a lot of the teams weren't happy. The model that had been implemented wasn't working. So you had a lot of unhappy people, and a lot of the retrospectives, no matter which route I took or which version I took, were boring.
Yeah.
But also people were unhappy. And I even slipped into the one thing that I never recommend to any Scrum Masters is, someone's not available, let's push the retrospective by a couple of days, and then it get pushed, because it wasn't actually because someone wasn't available. I was dreading it. I mean, I've been in some retrospectives where people have gotten so frustrated, where anger has come out. And my first couple of retrospectives were really bad. experience that I failed it. And it sounds bad. I mean, I've had chairs lifted up and all sorts, but obviously
Wow.
when you're a consultant, you are brought in because there are problems, and it's not generally the people, they are frustrated. And when I understand within human behaviors, frustration comes out in a multiple different ways. But one thing I love about yours is you brought the fun back into it. There's another Scrum Master I've worked with called 𝐓𝐡𝐞, and she was inspiring because when I actually first met her and her team, the team would run to the meeting room to do the retrospective because she was the same. She's exactly, and I need to hook you two up because you two would get on like a house on fire, because she used Lego and she played games in the retrospective. And I class myself as a lifelong learner. And yeah, it was inspiring to see people actually run into the retrospective instead of dragging their feet. And that's something that you're doing. You're making it exciting, as well as actually pulling out information and making it a proper learning session to what it actually should be. And I think that's another reason why you're such a success, because people are now enjoying coming to a retrospective and they're enjoying learning from you on how to make it such a success.
I guess it lends into the other area that I'm probably known for, and that's agile games. So I'm a firm believer in using games as a teaching concept. And I love using the quote that's often attributed to Benjamin Franklin, which is tell me and I'll forget, teach me and I'll remember, but involve me and I'll learn. So all of my coaching, all of my workshops I do, any teaching I'm doing, I'm looking to involve people. Yeah, and that will, if anyone's seen any of the workshops or the talks I've delivered at events, they're not passive one way, me talking at people. I involve them in the conversation. I make it a session where they're part of it. And I think online whiteboards like Miro really, really help with that. But involve people, and they love it. They love it. So why wouldn't you do that? It doesn't make sense to me why you wouldn't do that. Yeah, retrospective is just a fantastic opportunity for that involvement, for that engagement. And coming to your point earlier, people do switch off, you know, if they might have had a bad experience with it, there might be a really negative background, there might be a blame culture, there could be lots of reasons why people don't buy into retrospectives. Just try something a little different, give it a go. And with the templates I'm creating, it's just drag and drop, grab it and play with it, go. You don't have to spend time thinking about creating a retrospective format because there's one already there.
So I love the idea. I mean, I think the first retrospective with the team is always horrible, but the second retrospective is mind-blowing because you get to look back at the first one and say, what did we do different because of that? And this is what we got. And you basically create a daisy chain of moments of happiness. And a lot of projects I work in, when they say, you know, we want to have some metrics, and I say, well, let's have a happiness metric. How are our customers plus our teams? Because everyone says that the customer is the most important person. Well, actually, the quality of work is determined by the happiness of the people making that thing, not just the customers who buy into it or pay for the service. So let's do a combined metric of the happiness of the journey of that product or service. And I think a lot of that happiness is born out of respect, honesty, and responding to the retros and actually what's being said in them and doing something and changing. So I mean, I do love the second and onwards, but the first one is always horrible because it's usually, as you say, Sabrina, dealing with people that have not been listened to, been sidelined, been told they're going to be listened to and haven't been, or it's been used as an agenda by a very strong-willed person to push their view. So how do you deal with the negative behaviors in a retro?
So the very first thing I do with any team, with any retrospective, in fact, even if it's a mature team, is I use the retrospective prime directive by Noto and Karl. And to me, it just sets the groundwork or sets the intent of the session towards unconditional positive regard. We don't care what happens. It's not about blame here. Everyone did the best job they could with everything they had available to them at that time, the situation, the context in hand, the resources available, their skill sets. Start with that. I find it helps build in a little bit of psychological safety right at the beginning. There's obviously lots of techniques you can use during a retrospective to enable voices to be heard. So I tend to use a mixture of silent reflection to get people sharing their thoughts before a dominant voice can take over. Another great way of doing things. I like to use dot voting with a purpose. So I get them choosing the most important topic to go on, and usually based on some sort of wacky screen grab of the theme that we're doing at the time. So whether it's a skull and crossbones from the Pirates of the Caribbean one, or miniature Freddie Mercury heads if you're doing the Queen retrospective, whatever that may be. And sometimes I'll even say, guys, go on the internet, grab us a random image of the theme, and just we'll dot vote with that. So again, bring them into it and make it interactive rather than anything else. But the absolute best thing I can say with regards to helping negativity in a retrospective is demonstrate, or help them see and demonstrate changes happening. So, you know, one retrospective won't change the world, but then when they start to see improvement going forwards, and when they start to see the team opening up a bit more and actually actioning things, it's demonstration of change, which I find helps alter people's perceptions. What, you know, just talking is no good. And again, I quite often use when it comes to retrospectives, comes back to one of the original themed retrospectives I saw was the Elvis retrospective. A little less conversation, a little more action. And this is why I tend to shorten retrospectives, because one, we're all virtual and our focus can slip. You know, research suggests you're about 20 to 40 minutes for an adult before you start switching off anyway. So shortening the retrospective, not making it 2 hours long of meetings where people got to start to disengage, and get it focused on pulling actions out of that retrospective that they can try, experiment with. And I call them actions or experiments. A couple of things they can try differently that they can then revisit in a few weeks. Did it work for us? Did it help?
Excellent.
Well, I've got a question just to reverse back slightly. So you mentioned about the games. Now, I recently did an Agile confession where I overdid games. I love games, extremely playful person. I'm also the same as you. I'm a believer that getting people up and involved in doing things, and games are great ways to learn. Now, I'm interested to know is, have you ever done it where either you've overdone the games, or the game is pretty much crashed and burnt and it just hasn't worked, or people haven't wanted to do it? And if so, how did you deal with it? Because I'd be very intrigued, because I've been in that situation.
So the honest answer is I haven't. And I don't know if that's just because I am very fortunate. I don't know if it's just because of my style and energy that I bring to the situation. Often I'm the first to make a fool of myself, or the first to do something, and that can cause people to follow on. But I'm a big believer in using games as well. I imagine your confessional was the Agile confessional, Giles Lindsay. I was on that recently, or sometime in the past as well. But I guess one thing to recognize is that games as a learning method perhaps isn't for everyone, right? Everyone learns in different ways. Some people are very audio or auditory. They learn by listening. Some people prefer to be kinetic and moving. Some people prefer to just read and digest information in that way. And you have to mix it up for your audience. Now, if you, and when I'm doing training, I'm aiming to do the same thing. It's involve people, mix up with the audience. But if you can get enough people brought into it, there's kind of a, oh yeah, we should definitely do it. And then you can create a bit of fun around it. I guess it isn't for everyone. You have to acknowledge that. You have to accept that. Don't force fun. Don't force it if it's not there. But you have, again, this is why context really matters. So I'm afraid I can't give you any sage advice, because I've never dealt with that as a scenario. But
yeah, you have given me so much ammunition. I am so thankful.
It was years ago. It was actually years ago when I was first a Scrum Master.
Oh no, you can't drag it back now. It's too late.
Yeah, I do. I appreciate the advice, because it can happen to anyone, and I think the listeners will appreciate the advice as well. And now you've just given Karl so much ammo. I'll get him back at.
I'm sure you will.
So you mentioned you actually have platforms. You have a platform, is it? Is it a website? Is it where this content can be found, or where can be, if somebody wants to contact you, if somebody wants to get all this information, where would they go?
So I tend to, my prime method of communicating with people is LinkedIn. I do a lot of sharing on there. I have a website, www.thevirtualagilecoach.co.uk. On that website is where I share templates such as retrospectives you can use. It's where I share agile games you can download and play with your teams. Other than that, I'm on Twitter, but loosely, and I've got a YouTube channel where I share a lot of videos, interviews with Mike Cohen recently, Lisa Adkins recently, live workshops I've facilitated for anyone who wasn't able to attend them and wants to catch up, and just general Agile related content. There might be a topic that springs to mind that I just want to share my views on. I guess those are my mouthpieces out to people. And you can, if you are a fan of the retro templates or the blog content that I share, you can obviously subscribe and receive email updates as well.
So do you actually take on commissions? Do you go and work for clients as a consultant still, or is that something you used to do?
It's currently on hold. A mixture of IR35 and COVID put my consulting side of things on hold. I'm currently working full-time as an enterprise agile coach, and that keeps me busy alongside my, I guess, wider community endeavors that I do on a free basis. One of my values is there's nothing I create that will be behind a paywall. So someone actually has recently asked me this: why aren't you monetizing what you do? And I said, well, because I don't want to. Mm-hmm. I do it because I enjoy it, and I think by monetizing it, it will make it feel like work, and I'll probably disengage and switch off, and I'll do it less. So I do it because it helps people. I do it because of the stories when they communicate. They come to me and say, hey, we love the Ramadan retrospective. It was so inclusive. You know, thank you for doing this for the Muslim community. Those sorts of messages keep me doing what I do.
Yeah.
And you'll guess less people get an opportunity to enjoy it when you put money on it. And you know, I'd say I appreciate what you're actually doing, because there's a lot of Scrum Masters, coaches that can actually learn a lot from what you're doing. So I appreciate that as a person.
And I think we should mention the pirate in the room, because you did a pirate retrospective for the Agile 20 Reflect trustees, didn't you?
I did indeed. I arrived with my pirate outfit on, hat and a shirt, ready to run a Pirates of the Caribbean themed retrospective. I think my favorite prompt from that retrospective was around Captain Barbossa's quote, which is that, you know, the code is more guidelines than rules, as we say. And to me, Agile is exactly that. It's guidelines. Yeah. It's a starting point for you to experiment with until you find what works for you. It doesn't have to be this dogmatic set of rules that you follow, and if you don't, you are not Agile. That to me is an anti-pattern in the community, and I'm not a fan of it.
I actually used that sentence in a corporate document today with my current client, because because they're trying to, so they're adopting their own version of Agile, which is good, you know, because that's built around what they're trying to achieve as an organization. But they've also become a little bit dogmatic, and actually, for people doing the work, they don't need more dogma. What they need is something that helps them to work that is not terribly intrusive, but actually a facilitator. And that was the context of me adding that line in. But obviously I didn't write it. But it's so important that it is guidelines. It is there just to help. So.
Yeah, I mean, the manifesto itself says we're continuously looking for new ways or better ways of doing things. And to me, that statement alone is why we should not hold any single framework, approach, document. The manifesto itself shouldn't be held to it can never be updated, reviewed, discussed. We should, you know, that's why in the Agile 20 Reflect Festival, I ran a series of retrospectives focusing on, is it still fit for purpose? Let's examine the past, present, and future of the manifesto. And I was part of a panel discussion involving Ari van Benneken, one of the original creators of the manifesto. And the general consensus is the principles and values, they do completely still hold value. There are obviously slight tweaks that might be, that could be added. You know, the change of software, for example, to solution or product is a common theme, because Agile is now lending itself outside of the software industry as well. You can argue that there's things about psychological safety and experimentation not focused as much on the manifesto itself, and you could potentially add those. But in general, those principles and values, they're a great starting point, and they still hold true.
Yeah. Sorry, you've answered all my questions now.
I thought you said you were going to make me squirm. I feel like you failed in that respect so far, and that is a challenge to you, by the way.
Oh, you want me to ask you questions or make you squirm?
I mean, you said at the beginning, so I was expecting it. I was
Well,
expecting it to come. You can't make so bold a statement and then fail. Come on. And plus, I need to
I
give
thought there were
Sabrina
no
some ammunition
failures.
back
There
to
was
you.
just experiments.
True story.
Okay. So bringing in Agile into any new organization is always problematic.
Mhm.
Can you talk about somewhere where they didn't want to hear?
Where they didn't want to hear Agile?
Agile, yeah. And what did you do? Because obviously I mean, no one has 100% record.
No, true story. So I guess again, it's always contextual. Now, often I've been brought in for a purpose. They want to do Agile. Now, whether the original person hiring me in and everyone else aligns to that, different matter entirely. I think Agile has been missold. You know, everyone's been for an Agile transformation now, and it's probably failed. And I actually don't like the term transformation anymore anyway, because it suggests something finite. You've metamorphosed from a cocoon into a butterfly and then it's done. Whereas really it's a continuous, and I prefer evolution, right? I prefer, if you're doing, it's almost a ways of working evolution, not even an Agile. You can take Agile out of the equation. Mike Cohen said to me recently that if he could have, or if his aspiration is that we'd stop talking about Agile because it's just the way we do things. We don't need to mention Agile anymore. Have I had 100% record? No. I've previously gone into a company, been asked, I was hired in as a Scrum Master when they didn't really understand what a Scrum Master was. I helped them understand where I felt they needed to be, got them bought into an Agile transformation. I was fresh from consulting background, so I was used to that way of working. They changed my role to Agile coach. They allowed me to hire people in to support the transformation. I was leading their transformation. I lasted there 6 months. That suggests to me I wasn't doing a good enough job. So I made mistakes. You know, I didn't quite achieve maybe what I should have achieved. You could also argue, and again, one of my values is make myself redundant. Do I think I made myself redundant in 6 months? Absolutely not.
Okay, but from that experience, you gained some perspectives. You learned things that didn't work. You learned things that did work. Did you throw away the things that didn't work from that experience? Did you try them again somewhere else?
To me, it's, as I said, I'm a continuous work in progress as well. If I jokingly said I should name a child of mine whip or Kanban for that end, you know, and someone said that's child cruelty, Chris, don't do that. But I'm personally a continuous work in progress. You know, so I would have learned some mistakes from that. I was at the time fresh from consulting background. I was quite bought into SAFe at the time. I probably pushed that as an agenda more than I should have. There are things that I did really well there. I focused on the people, I listened, I set up a group of transformation champions. So it was a ground up initiative as much as getting the top leadership involved. I trained the leadership first to make sure they understood the situation. There's lots of good things I did, but there's probably areas that I could definitely have improved upon. And that's evidenced by the fact that I didn't stay there as long.
So
they did.
So the reason I'm asking is because I think that we need to avoid thinking in perfection terms as humans, because none of us are perfect ever. And so when something fails, the Socratic view is we throw it away and we try something else. Well, actually, maybe the reason it failed because it was the right thing at the wrong time, or the right thing in the wrong place, or the wrong thing in the wrong place. You said, I mean, it's that. You know, do we try it again? I usually try it again to find out whether or not it's me that's wrong, or the environment that's wrong, or the timing that's wrong, because I don't own the truth. So I suppose that's why I was asking. Did you then from that one go and try the same thing somewhere else?
So it's not that I tried the exact same thing. I'm a big believer in solo spectrum. Right, so I'm a journaler. I write down things that go well, things that don't go well on a daily basis. This helps with mindfulness and mental health, but on a weekly basis as well. And that includes, you know, what value have I brought? What's going well? So when it comes to a new assignment, for example, I'm very much thinking about what went well last time. What could I leverage again next time? But the problem is, I think, is that a lot of people come in with this one size fits all approach. What worked last time will work again. Whereas for me, the most important variable in any company's transformation, whatever you want to call that, is the people. So I always aspire nowadays to understand the people and their needs and tailor any approach according to that. Now, obviously, there's things I've seen that work well, and I may start with them if the situation suggests it. If I'm going to a company where they don't know what good looks like and they just want to be guided along that path, I'd say, well, let's start with this. This is a good starting point, and let's learn from it. If it's that they need a bit of refinement on what they're already doing, okay, here's where I feel you are. Here are some gaps I think there are. What do you think you could do differently? What could we try differently? And if they don't have an answer to that, well, maybe there's this approach you could try. Maybe there's that. It's always contextual. I don't think I would ever go into any situation with a new client, customer, company I'm working for again, and just apply exactly the same approach every time.
Okay. I've thought of a question that you can't answer.
Go on then.
Hang a minute, I've got a question, just a quick one.
It's a fist of five. How many fingers am I holding up?
I think you're holding, well, you're not holding up any at the moment.
I'd say one. I know Karl quite well.
It's the only one I could think of.
The king of retrospective actually retrospects himself. I mean, I get laughed at sometimes because I regularly, and I say it to Karl sometimes, I regularly like to retrospect myself and what I'm doing to keep myself in check, but also to make improvements. But my question is, so the viewers who are watching this will not see you in your prime because you do like to dress up, and I have the footage. I mean,
some of the stuff's over here. I've got my bunny ears from the recent. I've got my bunny ears from the recent Easter retrospective. I did a town hall recently that was snow day themed, so I put on my full-on skiing gear, and I chose the worst day of the year for it. It was 20 degrees.
So one, I'm disappointed that you're not dressed up today because I was hoping for that, but maybe I should have given you a pre-warning. Two, what is the worst outfit you've had to, or the most embarrassing outfit you've had to put on?
So I'm someone, honestly, who doesn't get embarrassed. It's just part of who I am. I have no shame. I don't care. I've dressed in all sorts of things over the years. What I can say the most uncomfortable outfit has been, it's very different. I was on my bachelor party a couple of years ago, and if anyone in the UK has seen the show Little Britain, there is a character from a certain village in Wales. I was dressed in that outfit, right? And then on top of that,
it sounds so painful.
So it's basically like this PVC thing that isn't breathable at all. Now I'm wearing that, and then we go paintballing. Now at paintballing, they then gave me overalls, which you have to wear. So I was wearing overalls on top of this unbreathable PVC thing. And then on top of that, as the stag, I was wearing a bunny onesie. So I had 3 layers on. I couldn't move my arms, so I could barely hold this gun. That was the most uncomfortable outfit. I wasn't ashamed by it. It amuses me. I can still look back and see how miserable I was sat there. But yeah, it was uncomfortable rather than anything else.
Okay, well, please send in the pictures and we'll see what we can do with them.
Would I wear it to a retrospective? I think if it was a place where I knew they'd be on board with it, psychological safety was there. What I will tell you, my current company, about a month ago, I led a fancy dress themed day, right? And what I did is every session I was involved in that day, I turned up in a different outfit. So I was in 6 different sessions on that day. The outfits included a crayon dress with a purple wig, okay? A Top Gun themed, so I had the glasses, the aviator's flight suit, the Guardians of the Galaxy outfit that I've got, because I've been told to look a bit like Chris Pratt, which I love hearing. A bear onesie. I had a Jester costume and Wario from Mario Kart. So on that day, 6 different outfits. And that was at my current company. And on the Friday afternoon, end of week beers, I was stood there, purple wig, yellow dress on. Everyone thought it was hilarious. So I don't really care.
I love it. I love it. You have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and we will definitely be dragging you back on here again soon. Thank you so much for today.
Look forward to it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.